without these TPIs speaking to their end users, there's no way the wider sector, suppliers, or whoever it is, data companies, can make the change. Has there been, before we talk about the particular realm around net zero, has there been good enough communication over the years? Some would say it's been a imbalanced relationship. Let me start with you, Aaron, on your thoughts on communication between the sector and TPIs.
we're relatively new to working with TPIs, and I think one thing we found is that part of the reason we want to work with you is because you develop great relationships. So I don't think we're qualified yet to say whether it's an imbalanced relationship or not, but definitely you've got very strong relationships with your customers. Your customers trust you, they listen to what you're saying, and ultimately you're kind of pivotal to this net zero journey. And yeah, you need to be looking at grid power, but also power from other different sources. So yeah, we're looking at partnering with you because of the strength of those relationships.
Sally?
For ourselves, working on the TPI side, we find it quite difficult at times, especially when customers are up against the energy crisis. They want to get onto this journey, but it's becoming so expensive and unaffordable that they don't know where to start. So it's about how we draw it all back for customers to make it actually understandable but also affordable and getting them onto those little steps. There's a lot of people out there giving things like grant funding for heat pumps. Customers don't know if that is actually viable or feasible for their property. And it's about TPIs taking ownership and actually guiding customers about a grant fund of £40,000 may seem a real good bargain. But if the payback's 99 years and the customer's not aware of that, then when is a bargain a bargain? And I think it's that bit that we need to actually work more in collaboration with customers and the supplier side to actually do the feasibility studies for our end user customers.
I think for me that the type of information, the type of conversations have changed. So you're right, the TPIs are speaking to customers a lot more than we are.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is because you're speaking to multiple suppliers about multiple different things. And unless you really trust the suppliers you're working with, you're not going to want to bring them into the room with the customer. So the more of that we can see would be better. If you're working with suppliers that you trust, that you can actually bring in to the conversation with the customer, great. You'll come up with more innovative solutions. You'll be co-creating. But the type of information that we need to now get is completely changing. We spoke about market-wide half-hourly settlements, what kind of technology is the customer working with, what are their plans for the next 3 years, all of this kind of thing. So we're asking for more from you, and it's difficult to get that from the customer who might just want an easy life. So I think the types of conversations are definitely changing.
We talked just earlier, about the fact that no one can help. Not one company can supply all the solutions that are out there. So for the end user, they go to the broker, and in a way that's their crutch. Help me get to net zero. What can you do, right? And they go and then talk to all the different battery and solar and all of that. Is there a case here, which kind of fundamentally goes against what the market is that the TPI has to then open up to multiple suppliers and multiple product providers to give the full picture? But of course, they'll be like, well, don't buy from him, buy from me or buy from her. Is that a kind of issue that we'll be facing the sector? Because if you really want to help get to net zero, you've got to have a completely agnostic collaboration.
Yeah. You do, but that comes part of the
So
trust.
they say, well, we only want to use you for this, but you go, hang on, I could provide you other things.
You can.
You'd walk away, would you?
You'd have the conversation, but again, you've got to be transparent about what you can actually do and what your capabilities are. You can't, if a TPO is coming to you saying, well, the customer wants to do this, this, and this, and you say, yep, we can do all that, and then you get off the phone and you call up your head of product development and go, we need to have this product immediately. It's never going to work because you'll be going around in circles for years. If you're genuinely authentic about what it is that you can provide, and even if you're saying that's something we're looking at in the next 3 years, we're not there now. Where's the customer?
There's someone else you can go
journey?
to. Yeah,
we probably wouldn't recommend other people. But we'd be talking about
generous, but not that generous.
Well, we're only going so far. But you are talking about, here's the journey that we're on. Here's where we're going to get to. It might not be right for this customer, but if it comes up again,
with
keep
someone
us
else
in mind.
Yeah, fine.
So yeah.
Aaron, as a new player to the market, what's your view on that? Because fundamental to what they can provide.
Yeah, I think part of it is the market's got to provide the TPIs and the brokers with the innovation, right? It's like you need to be speaking to a range of different companies, but you also need to speak to specialists in individual sectors. So I think part of it's a market problem, right? There's a lot of regulatory changes going on. There aren't as many businesses executing on the back of those regulatory changes as there probably should be. And then that feeds into you guys being able to provide the right products to your customers. So it's just generally speaking to the whole ecosystem and kind of suppliers, independents, aggregators, and just determining what's right for your customers.
And you're working with, a lot of vulnerable people, aren't you, the client base that you've got there, Sally?
Yeah, we've working with our sector, it's like I say, charities and not-for-profits. They tend to look for things like fully fixed contracts because they need budget certainty. But then with some suppliers, then you're opening up to how do they do the carbon net zero journey when suppliers are getting more critical about enforcing take or pay. For example, if you're trying to get someone on a carbon net zero journey, you sign a 3-year contract, then you've got to then negotiate with a supplier to make sure they don't get a take or pay bill for actually doing the right thing. And I think some of it really goes back to getting that baseline data for customers in the fact of what is it that they can do, what can they do in-house, what do they need to spend money on, and what is that journey to them as an individual, not a one-size-fits-all and trying to fit the customer into what you're trying to offer them. It's more a case of actually doing like a discovery document and looking at their exact structure, what it is that they've got, what they can actually influence a change on, and what is outside of their scope, what is actually unaffordable to them, and actually taking them in a bite-sized journey so that they can actually deliver what is good for them and actually what will make savings in a short period of time.
I want to start with you on this point because you are from a broker, right? So the word collaboration, have you felt that over the years with suppliers? And you can be brutally honest.
Some suppliers are better than others.
Hey.
Getting data out of suppliers is often, especially for TPIs, I think we'll all have the same frustration, is that some customers will come to us for carbon net zero work, but they've not done their procurement for ourselves. So we've still got an LOA, but then getting a supplier to actually acknowledge that LOA for us to get their baseline data is near on impossible. And I think a lot of people in this room will totally agree with me that getting data and the data we need to actually get people through this carbon net zero journey is a nightmare. And that needs to change. Suppliers have to acknowledge that there's not going to be just one LOA for a customer. And that is, I think, one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we come across.
Anything you want to add on that?
Me? I was going to say, go for it.
I was just saying we see the other side of that. So we're trying to model battery storage for our partners and the customers, and we say simple things like, oh, can we have half-hourly data, can we have bill, and they say, oh, well, we can't get that. And that is a massive stuff. We can turn around a report in 3 days to say, put battery storage in, put solar in, this is what it does for your carbon emissions, this is what it saves you on your bill. But if we don't have that vital data, then we can't actually start that modelling process for the customers.
So from my side of things, this is where being able to have a direct conversation with the customer is really important, because you're right, we will have multiple LOAs for a customer. We've got to manage data security alongside commercial confidentiality that we might have in place with an existing TPI.
Yeah.
So we want to speak to the customer to say, look, we can give you the data, here you go, you choose where you want to put that.
Right, yeah, I get what you're saying. So you get the ability to say, for the customer, say, right, here's who I'm going to allow access to.
Yeah, exactly.
To provide the best service. When it comes to kind of what you want, what sort of net zero sort of kind of services can you help TPIs deliver? And what sort of things can you help them shape, which might not seem like it's actually a net zero, but it's maybe sits under kind of energy efficiency or something else that would help them progress. Let's start with you on that one, Aaron.
Yeah, so we do battery storage predominantly. We will look at doing solar alongside our partners as well. 3 key things really, reducing the bills, going greener, but we're seeing a lot of customers who are trying to electrify struggle with grid constraints. So they're trying to put solar on the roof, they're trying to put EV on site. They're going to the DNO and the DNO says you can't have capacity or you can't have the right capacity or it's too expensive. These are the sort of things that are going to block every business's net zero journey. So we're looking to help support that using battery storage. So I think it's very much around how does the site work holistically? What have they done to date? What energy efficiency measures have they done? What solar have they done? And how do they fight the battle with the grid to continue to electrify and roll on?
Well, do you offer like a toolkit, like a pathway for the TPIs to follow?
Exactly, yeah. So to us, collaboration means doing a lot of stuff for free up front, right? It's a new product class, so...
Knock him out for freebies, there we go.
We're aware that the education piece needs to be there, so it's pulling in, if we can have our partner pull in the data, we then provide them with calculators, we do full reports, we help support on the sale to the customer. I'd say probably not many people in this room have sold a lot of battery storage, so it's educating on the product as well, and we're very aware it's a new asset class, and it's something that is vital, but we need to do the education piece on.
Ben, from your point of view?
Going back around to that point of there not being a single solution, a single supplier. So from our side of things, everything we do is how what the customer does interacts with the grid, what happens through that meter. So we want to be providing you the information to say, here's what our forecast is for the next 3 days ahead in terms of, what's N2EX going to do, what's system going to do. You can then tell us what you want to lock, unlock, at what times of the day, what the customer's going to do, and we'll then feed that back in. So we're almost enhancing the solutions that you're offering. And that's where you need to work out what it is that each business is going to specialise in into your overall strategy.
What do you want from suppliers?
A bit more transparency, really, in the fact of what it is that they can do, how it impacts onto the contract, and how it impacts onto the end user customer. You're exactly right.
Sorry to just interrupt you there. Are you following the mantra of this one, which is you'll find out what the end user wants,
yes,
and then you want them to help you, or are you looking for them to provide you the solutions and the tools for this?
Some of it is a collaboration on all levels, because it is so new and there's so much technology coming forward, especially battery. Battery is really key because of the DNO constraints, especially in some of your rural areas as well, where people are wanting to do the right thing but then having these blockages, or there's infrastructure changes that are adding to tens of thousands of pounds that are unaffordable. So some of it is about the collaboration from the supplier side, but then also people like yourselves who can bring in the infrastructure with us. And I think it's more of that project work where we have to all come together to actually work out, is it a wider piece of work we can do with neighbouring organisations who can pull together to actually share costs. And it is that work of pulling us all together without these blockages that we seem to have, where one won't talk to the other, or the DNO won't talk to a supplier, and we get into these bottlenecks where we just can't get things done, even though we're trying to get the right thing done.
How do you feel from the other side for the TPIs? And I'll come to you last on this. What do they need to do to collaborate better with the end user that would then allow you guys to paint a better picture and offer better services?
So, sorry I mentioned earlier, but that holistic view of what the customer's doing. So you mentioned about sort of volume tolerance being a problem. If you've got a customer and you're not asking about are they making efficiency changes or are they not installing solar over the next 5 years and putting on a contract, you could end up in a position where it's hit a volume tolerance breach and you're then having to explain that to the customer. Whereas if you bring that to us up front and say, right, here's what the customer's doing now, here's the last 24 months of data, they're going to reduce by 20% during these times, and they've got this solar that's going on in 2 years' time, probably, what's best to do? We can then model the contract around what the most likely scenario is, or we offer a shorter term contract that then covers the period of certainty, so when it's more clear what they're doing, we'll have the right contract in at the right time. So it's about getting as much information about what does the future look like, not just what you've done in the past, but what is going to happen next. How likely is it? When's it taking place? Give us that information and we'll make sure the contract is right for that customer's setup. And again, we'll be completely honest about if this happens, then this, then this, then this. The customer's not want to spend all their time going through every possible scenario. So we can give that to you and you can make a judgment on how much does the customer need to know about the potential impacts. But as long as you know it, you're sure what's going to happen in the future. If you're creating a long-term partnership with that customer, you'll then be able to go back to them to explain, what's happening with the contract, what changes are coming in place, what's the impacts going to be.
Aaron, from your point, what do they need to do?
Yeah, I think we kind of sit in the middle, really, so I kind of completely get what you're saying. It's that certainty over the future point as well, though. It's it's hard to say what's going to happen in 6 months, let alone kind of a year, 2 years, 3 years. So, and there's a load of other people who are probably approaching the customer as well, trying to sell a different type of product. So I completely sympathise on both sides. You need the certainty to hedge what you've got and to outline the contract. You also then don't really have the certainty because people are pitching products and things might change, demand might go down, product requirements might go down, so they might be producing less stuff. I don't think there is an answer, right? Which is why we're spending so long.
But again, going on that,
if
as long as you're communicating with the customer, as long as you have that holistic relationship and you can say, yes, you can do all of these things and it's great, you can reduce your efficiency by however much, and the market's gone up since, so actually you're unlikely to face a volume tolerance breach by dropping your consumption, brilliant. Like, fantastic. But as long as the customer's informed about what those changes are actually going to do to the supply.
So what are you doing to collaborate with the actual end user?
Sorry, I felt like I was directed straight over.
I think it's good for your larger customers. However, there's a massive group of customers that get left behind.
And that's what I want to talk
SMEs.
about. Absolutely, I want to talk about that.
SME, where you're using portals for pricing, etc., you don't have that relationship. So you get caught up, as a TPI, we get caught in a position where, yes, we want to have those talks, but then you don't get an account manager to have those talks. So you're then having to juggle of what is the right thing to do when you know a customer wants to go on a carbon net zero journey. The SME side of it, I feel, is very let down by suppliers in the fact that we don't get supported on the carbon net zero journey as much as if you're doing a flex, INC, commercial, large-scale customer. Large-scale customers, it's easier. That's easy work. I think it's the smaller ones who are trying to save £10 here, £20 there, who are wanting to make these savings, who are the ones who get caught out because there's no safety net for them for TPIs.
And is the problem there you have basically a transactional relationship with those people rather than knowing them? Do you know the way that you know the bigger ones?
We tend to have account managers for a lot of the suppliers, but it isn't. When you come to pricing a contract, it isn't that straightforward.
No,
it is more of a transactional situation. You've got your 3-year contract and that's it. You can't say, well, in year 1, year 2, we're going to use this amount and like merge it over a 3-year contract. It doesn't tend to work that way when it comes to volume tolerance. So it does get difficult if you know by the 3rd year, the customer wants on a 3-year contract, so the 3-year price is looking really good, but the 3rd year is where they're going to drop their volume and then they're going to get stung. And this is where it becomes very difficult for a TPI to actually get customers of the smaller magnitude through this journey.
For your sector particularly, which I think is, again, and I really admire the work that you guys do, but that's where society is, right? It's in charity shops, it's in churches, it's in kind of hospices, in places like that, where they have they're doing society, right? They're making society work. And yet, when we talk to those people, we talk a lot to people in religious circles, and they want to change. They feel a calling to change, let alone that. Is the information there at that lower level where you're right, everything's pandered for bigger, everyone wants big customers who know what they're doing. Do you have a real problem like that? When to get that collaboration for that end user, they're not clued in, you're trying to help them, there's not enough coming down the line.
We've been doing quite a lot of work with the government because a lot of, you'll notice, the grant funding comes in and we'll give you this amount of money to install this bit of work, but the government don't fund the baseline work. So the government don't say, here's some money to go and do your baseline reporting to actually work out what it is you need. And this has been a massive sticking point. So we've been working closely with the government and the House of Lords to actually get funding available and the next lots of funding so that people can actually focus on the baseline and have independent baselines undertaken. So that's like what we do. We don't work in collaboration with any supplier of like solar or anything like that. What we do is we work out what the baseline is for the carbon net zero journey and then how to measure it going forward. We work on behaviours and attitudes, etc. And you're right, the funding system in our country doesn't support charities, not-for-profits. There isn't anything really for them to actually reach out for. But there are a lot of people ringing these organisations saying, if you have this installed, you're going to make this massive saving. And they believe it. And then we have churches coming to us who have got solid wall, solid floor, big vaulted, massive front door, stained glass. they've had heat pumps put in, and now they can't afford to run the heating because it's 3 times higher.
And that's what's
than-
exactly happened to a school, I know. Exactly, that sort of thing.
And they've turned the heating off. So now they've got a freezing cold church. It's got things in it that are going mouldy, etc. And we do quite a lot of pro bono work helping these organisations. But then what they're having to do is put secondary heating in. They've had the gas taken out because they thought it was the best thing for the environment. So they've got no gas to go back to. They're stuck with heat pumps that are not effective in that type of building. And now we're having to advise
So they've
them
been
how to
sold the
warm.
wrong solution
Totally.
at the beginning. And
Yeah,
that's the thing.
but they thought they were doing the right thing because
Yes.
the government gave them a grant funding, so they
Yeah.
thought the government was telling them to do the right thing.
And is
It
that
wasn't.
really what the danger of this transition? That the solutions, and I'm sure your batteries are fantastic, but if someone doesn't need that battery, why are they being told that's the way to go? And there is a lot of that confusion. How do the TPIs help? And I think you've given a brilliant example there, Sally, about the wrong thing for the customer or the end user when there is something out there that is actually, all right, it might be slightly higher carbon, but it's actually the right thing for them to do. How do we get that in this transition going? What can we do to help that kind of, integration of where things are?
This is that trusted partnership piece.
Yeah.
If you have that relationship with the customer where they could be getting however many phone calls a day and they get that one salesperson on who's brilliant. They've absolutely sold them on heat pumps or whatever it is.
Exactly.
And they
they've
then
read it in the news. They think
exactly,
it's-
they've got the common grass gone. They then call you up to say, we're talking about this, we think this is a great opportunity for us, what do you think? You can then look at the impact of that on the wider business, the impact on it and the contracts that are already in place, and give them a genuinely informed, impartial decision on what the right thing is to do. There isn't a single answer that's going to work for every customer. They're all going to be on different journeys. If you know what the technologies that are available, the capabilities that are out there, if you're having these kind of conversations, the opportunity is then to go, that might not be the right answer to you, which is always a difficult conversation to have, but here's something that might. Let's start exploring this space. If you get the customer on the right journey at the right time, you're not going to be, worst case scenario, you're not going to be wasting however much money it is on these kind of problems. But in a sort of an okay scenario, they've just wasted a couple of years exploring something that doesn't work for them anyway. Whereas to build that trusted partnership piece, if you're giving them the right solutions that come in at the right time, that work with all the other projects that they've got going on internally, that's how you build a really strong relationship and you can put them on the right journey going forward.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's the holistic kind of education piece. They come to you and say, and we get this a lot, we speak to business and they say, speak to our TPI, we speak to them, we provide the numbers. It's for you guys to interrogate the numbers and to interrogate the solution providers and, like I say, kind of act as that buffer to the end user and give them an element of protection, which I'm sure you guys are doing.
Is there you're there, Sally, and I keep going back to it because you're the only TPI we've had on the panel so far. But for those people in places like the churches and all that, are they aware? Clearly they are, because they're seeing what's going on in the media and they feel they need to be part of net zero. So do you think that's kind of driving them to make decisions a bit too quickly? Because they go, well, we just need to be green. Let's go and he's sold me this or she's told me that. That's the one to do.
I feel it is, and some of it is led by grant funding and it only being there for a limited time. And it's
And
like
so you've got
a bit
to
like the
grab-
Black
yeah,
Friday
yeah.
sale, isn't it?
Yeah.
That someone gets told, right, you can save £40,000, but you've got to sign next week.
Yeah.
Some people who are not so informed think that it's the right thing to do because they're looking at figures but not associating it to their own property. And I feel that there is quite a hard sell at the moment with government grants and other funding that is available to these types of organisations, that they feel up against the wall that they need to make that decision now, and that they're going to lose £40,000. So if you've got your two hands out and someone's putting 40 grand in your hand, you're going to think, well, if I don't make that decision and that's taken away,
Yeah, but what if
and I
that
still need
42
to
grand
do
costs
it,
you £500,000 down the line?
yeah,
You know what
and
I mean?
that's the
It's-
thing. In energy costs,
Yeah.
that 40 grand is literally probably cost them a fortune further down because they've not made the right decision.
Yeah.
And I think it is that independence that we need to give them as TPIs to get them to not panic. And I think some of it is that this government's banding around dates as well. You've got to be carbon net
Yes.
zero by 2035.
Yeah.
And it's all in the press, isn't it? It's constant pressure that I've got to do something. I've got to be seen to be doing something, or I've got to lead it because especially in the charity not-for-profit sector, there is a bit of competition there where we can be the first organisation
Yeah.
to be green, to be
Yeah.
seen to be green,
Yeah.
but it's not always what's cost effective or the right type of green, and it's whether they hold back a little time
Yeah.
before moving forward.